Good Tuesday morning, everybody, and welcome to Breaking Point. Soccer is still out on his honeymoon, but we have an amazing show for him.
Indeed we do. We have lots to discuss. Kamala now appears to be the presumptive nominee. She's locked up sufficient delegates. She gave a barn burner of a speech over at what was Biden HQ, which is now Kamala Harris HQ. We'll get into all of that. We also have some polls, early indications of how she fares vis-a-vis Donald Trump as opposed to Joe Biden. We also want to take a look at a wild hearing yesterday with the director of the Secret Service, who inexplicably still has her job. Hopefully that doesn't last too much longer because there is bipartisan outrage over the many manifest failures and inability to answer just basic questions yesterday in this hearing. So we'll bring you that. We also have the Dearborn mayor joining us to talk about Bibi Netanyahu's visit to town and specifically about how he is viewing the shift from Joe Biden to Kamala Harris. So going to be very interesting to hear his perspective and that of his constituents today. We're going to take a look at the latest conspiracy with regard to Joe Biden. Where's Joe?
Where's Joe?
I mean, listen, it is a little weird he hasn't appeared in public at this
Definitely
point. I will
weird.
give them that.
Yep, absolutely weird.
But in any case, we'll give you the very latest about what is being shared and spread there, including his phone call into his former headquarters, campaign headquarters. But was it really a phone call, Ryan? Was it actually
a recording?
We don't know.
A voice memo.
We'll take a look.
It was WhatsApp.
Also wanted to catch up with what's going on with RFK Jr. report that he asked for a Trump cabinet position in exchange for an endorsement, a quid pro quo that was too shameless, reportedly, even for the Trump people. And so what that means for the race. And we got Jeff Stein in.
Not a perfect call.
Yeah, not a perfect call, I guess, from RFK Jr.'s standpoint. And we've got Jeff Stein in to talk about Kamala Harris. Who is she really? I think that is a big question mark. I don't think anyone can really resolve. What are the indications about what her core policy commitments could be, if to the extent that there are any? Taking a look at Jim Cramer, apparently very happy with the shift from Biden to Kamala, which, you know, you could take in a number of different directions. So anyway, we'll dig into all of that, given that she is now the presumptive nominee. And we can go ahead and start the show there because, as I mentioned, she gave this speech at what was Biden HQ. She's just basically taking his campaign over. She gets the benefit of his war chest. She has asked his campaign manager to now serve as her campaign manager. She's keeping even Chris Coons as a campaign co-chair, adding Gretchen Whitmer in as well. But let's take a listen to a little bit of what she had to say yesterday.
I think we made the right decision. I know how hard you've worked, how many sacrifices you made. And so many of you uprooted your lives for me and the kind of commitment few people make for anything these days, but you made it. And I've been honored and humbled. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. My word is a Biden, that for all you've done for me and my family.
And I know it's been a roller coaster, and we're all filled with so many mixed emotions about this. I just have to say, I love Joe Biden. I love Joe Biden, and I know we all do, and we have so many darn good reasons for loving Joe Biden. And I have full faith that this team will be the reason we win in November. You all who are here. And as Julie always says, and I will quote the great Julie, we are one team, one fight. So in the days and weeks ahead, I, together with you, will do everything in my power to unite our Democratic Party, to unite our nation, and to win this election. You know, as many of you know, before I was elected as vice president, before I was elected as United States Senator, I was the elected Attorney General, as I've mentioned, of California. And before that, I was a courtroom prosecutor. In those roles, I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
So, Ryan, what do you make of her first outing? A lot of enthusiasm there for her at Biden, now Harris HQ.
Well, interesting that she's definitely leaning into the cop versus the predator kind of meme. She moved away from that in 2020. She tried to say that she was a progressive prosecutor because it fit with the more kind of progressive time of that era, but it did not match at all, her record.
Right.
And so the gap between that and her record was the thing that Tulsi Gabbard, drove a steamroller through and ran her over. There's now a bit of a backlash to that period of time. And so she's kind of re-embracing the Kamala the cop a little bit.
Yeah.
Now,
she's also not in a primary, really.
Not in a primary, just going after Trump.
Right.
And so, she doesn't have to win over anybody in the party. She's spent the last 24 hours with what Axios called shock and awe, I think accurately. Like she's just nobody wanted to run against her. And we see why. The entire party, which loves order and hierarchy, ordered themselves behind her. She's raised what? Over $100 million.
She's raised over $100 million from grassroots.
And then tens of millions from rich people.
$150 million from rich people, at least. So we're talking about $250 million in a roughly 24-hour time period.
Right, and she's racked up, all the endorsements she needs from delegates. She's got everybody lining up behind her. She's got all of her opponents dropping out. So there will be a vote. Yeah. Although it won't be at the convention.
Right. They are sticking with the virtual roll call August convention 8th, plan for some reason.
They continue to tell this lie that for ballot access reasons. They're so far into the lie, and now it's less controversial to go forward with it.
Right, that they're just got to stick with it. Well, because the other thing that they continue to be worried about is protesters with regard to Palestine. So, the original... So Ohio did have this rule, this law. Ohio, the Republican governor and legislature there, changed the law to make sure it wasn't a problem. But Democrats had already seized on this excuse of the law initially in order to try to avoid any sort of messiness with regards to pro-Palestine protesters. Then it became very convenient for the Biden dead-enders who wanted to, make sure he could lock this up as quickly as possible. And now I think you're right. I mean, it continues to be convenient in terms of Palestine protesters, but also they're so far into the lie that we're like, I guess we're just doing this virtual roll call thing. Yeah. And they liked it last time around in 2020, even though going back and looking at the online DNC is sort of like a fever dream. Right. Some weird stuff there. and you've seen some of the rationale for why the Biden dead enders were so confident that they could be so out there, for Biden, calling everybody who's trying to take him out racist, because they knew from the Squad to the Rachel Bitterkoffers of the world that the second that Biden stepped aside would be just permission to forget all of it and just jump in, with 2 feet for Kamala Harris. Yeah. Rachel Bitterkoffer, who, doesn't even matter who she is. Resistance Twitter. She's actually a Virginia political scientist. Yeah. Christopher Newport University, I believe.
Analyzes elections using the different, data points, but has become like a leading blue anon voice, was one of the ones just, most viciously attacking people about taking Biden out. She said something this morning like, this is the first morning where I didn't want to hide under my bed. Under my covers, like all day long. It's like, what? You were attacking everybody who was trying to get you to this place where you're now joyously participating in it. But the thing about joy is it just washes it all away. So Democrats are so happy that it's like the celebration at the end of the Super Bowl, everybody forgets what happened in Game 2. Yeah. It's like,
I mean, Harry says that like all of these people who were vociferously arguing that Biden is the greatest leader we've ever had, and it is outrageous that anyone would want to push him aside. The minute he does, they're like the happiest people on the planet, and celebrating, the historic nature of Kamala Harris' candidacy, which is, legitimate. She will be the first Black woman to be a major party nominee. So that is, that is history making. It is a big deal. But to get back to your point, Ryan, we could put A5, I believe, up on the screen. We have a major update to this, though. This was yesterday. Kamala had crossed the 1,000 mark in terms of committed delegates. Now she is at 2,668 delegates. That means she has significantly more than the majority that she would need. So she now really is the presumptive nominee, given the support through the shock and awe campaign. I mean, really one of the only remaining holdouts who hasn't just fully endorsed her is actually Barack Obama.
What about the brother from like Marshall Islands or whatever, who won the 3 delegates in Guam? Or
I think he's still holding out. We looked up his name.
Jason Palmer?
Yeah, I was going to say we looked up his name yesterday, and I've already forgotten it.
He's famous in the mainland, according to his own campaigns. Yet somehow we can't remember his name. But yeah, so Barack Obama and that guy are among the lone holdouts. Yeah, Obama can keep his elder statesman image here.
You think that's what he's doing?
At this point, I mean, I think he was genuinely hoping that there would be some type of open contest.
Yeah.
Because also an open contest is where he gets to be the man.
Yeah, that's right.
Behind the scenes.
Maker, queen maker.
It's not going to happen. So now it's pointless you'll probably see him when it's like completely over.
Yeah.
Also, one last point on Bidikofer before we move on. She was also the one arguing that it was completely illegal to get rid of Biden.
Oh, was she one of those?
Not just wrong.
It was illegal.
Illegal.
Yeah.
You can't do it. And now she's absolutely over
Which was
the
always
moon.
So preposterous, because he wasn't even the nominee yet. He was the presumptive nominee, but there's a reason why you use that word, because it hasn't happened yet. So the idea that he couldn't himself step aside and that would be illegal to do was always preposterous. I still see Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, out there claiming he's going to mount some sort of legal challenges to Biden being swapped out for Kamala. But again, he wasn't even the nominee, so good luck with those legal challenges. Those aren't going anywhere. But that's a great point, that a number of these people were making the point that this would be illegal and it would go to, it would be wrong and Biden's amazing and how could you possibly want to do that? And now they're completely over the moon now that it is Kamala Harris. Just to run through some of the additional movement in her direction, we can put up A2. Pelosi did come out and endorse Kamala Harris. She didn't do it right away. So she and Barack Obama were initial, early, significant holdouts, since they were also two of the most critical figures in terms of pushing Biden out of the race. But she says that today is with immense pride and limitless optimism for our country's future that I endorse Vice President Kamala Harris for President of the U.S. My enthusiastic support for Kamala Harris for President is official, personal, and political. I don't really know all of the intra-California politics within the Democratic Party, but it was my sense that I guess she's more of a Gavin Newsom person. And so she was kind of holding space open in case Gavin had a chance to make a run at it. Once it was clear that everyone's consolidating quickly around Kamala Harris, she goes ahead and jumps in so she can be on the right side there. Let's put the next piece up on the screen so we can get to some of the polling about what we know at this point. So this was a new national poll that came out, and it has Kamala losing to Trump, but by less than she was losing to Trump previously. Or rather less than Biden was losing to Trump previously. Trump here is +2 against Biden. He had been +6. So you can see, I'm sorry, +4. I'm just screwing this one up all the way around. But Trump was +4. Now he's +2. So Harris somewhat outperforming Biden there. And that's kind of what we're seeing. We also saw a Quinnipiac poll that came out this morning that showed a similar result. Trump had been +3 nationally on Biden. Now he's +2 nationally on Kamala. That changes within the margin of error, so not a huge swing. We see a more significant swing. We can put the next piece up on the screen. We see a more significant swing if you dig into some of this data of which groups are moving towards Kamala Harris. And one thing that was really interesting to me here, Ryan, is the fact that actually every group except people with postgraduate degrees moved towards Kamala Harris. So you see significant movement among Black Americans towards Kamala Harris vis-a-vis where they were with regard to Biden. You see some movement with regard to white voters, some movement with regard to Hispanic voters, significant movement with less than college degree, some movement with college grads and no movement with postgrads. So it's a little bit different than what I would have expected, frankly. But in essentially every group, she outperforms Biden by at least some margin, according to this poll.
Yeah, and I think Democrats had kind of maxed out their postgraduate lead that they could have on Trump, because
they'd already locked that one up.
the postgraduate folks, they read the news closely. They're on their phones all the time, checking Twitter or Threads or whatever.
Yeah.
And they knew how bad Biden was, and they were still supporting him.
Yeah.
So now they're supporting Kamala.
Yeah.
Like, who you got against Trump is basically how those
They're
people
sort
are
of the
thinking.
most like partisan locked in,
Yeah.
least swingy of the
They're-
potential
They're
voters.
not taking in any new information and then deciding to vote for Trump.
Yeah.
Zero.
They are the
Like, he could be-
epitome of vote blue no matter
Biden
who.
could have been dead on election day, and they would cast their ballot for Biden.
Yeah, this
Give
is
you a
the
reason why that was-
Rachel Bidikofer
Yeah.
vote, basically.
Yes. Exactly. Yes.
All right, we've got another poll here. This was an interesting one. This is from Civics. We can put this up on the screen. They say, we started tracking Trump versus Harris 2 weeks ago. Normally this info is paywalled, but this is our sharing. So through 7/21, Biden was trailing Trump 46-44 nationally. Harris was ahead in this poll 48-46. They say Trump is stuck at a ceiling of 46. Harris gains from third-party undecided voters. And then if you dig into the crosstabs here, you get kind of a similar picture. I can put this next piece up on the screen. Young voters go from Biden +8 to Harris +20. So that's not surprising, given how disgusted young voters in particularly have been with regards to Biden's policy vis-a-vis Israel. Perhaps they're giving Harris more of a shot there, in spite of the fact that obviously, she's part of this administration. Independents go from Trump +16 to, they narrow that margin to Trump +8. Harris also picks up 7 percentage points among black voters, 8 percentage points among Hispanic voters, almost all from third party and undecided. So what do you make of this data here, Ryan?
A lot of people were just refusing to vote for Biden, but did not want to vote for Trump. And that is how we kind of have understood this election the entire time, that so many people just don't like either candidate.
Yeah.
But a ton of them just really, really, really did not like Biden, but they're definitely not voting for Trump, or they're like, they hadn't gotten themselves to the place yet where they were willing to admit that they were going to vote for Trump. And then Kamala Harris comes in, she has a burst of news. People are like, okay, she seems like a fine, normal person.
Right.
Like, I don't dislike her. And I'm not afraid that she's incapable of doing the job like Joe Biden. Plus, you're right. She wasn't the one. Her administration was sending weapons and is sending weapons to Israel. But she was not the one out there bear hugging Netanyahu. And people understand, in general, that vice presidents are powerless. So
Right.
she could benefit from that kind of just intuitive sense that people have that this was a Biden plan. Now, how she handles the Netanyahu visit is reflective of this. She doesn't want to be seen publicly with him, but she's going to meet privately with him. We'll talk about that later.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's what it is. What's your read? Is this what you would have expected to see?
Yeah, this is about what I would have expected to see. Some of the polling indicates she performs less well than Biden when it comes to like old white voters, where he has had a particular strength. And, that is a real negative for her, because those are people who they show up. There's a lot of them and they show up. So that was one of his strengths. But I do think that the fact, number one, she's a way more committed and credible messenger when it comes to Democrats' core message about abortion. I mean, Biden has never been comfortable there. And all he can, as we've discussed, like all he really knows and cares to talk about these days is NATO anyway. But he doesn't even really personally agree with choice and has been bad on abortion his entire career. So, to ask him to be a credible messenger there. I also think that there's an expectation. Kamala not only has credibility to deliver the message, she has more credibility that she might actually do something on it, like she might actually care about it and exert some sort of effort to do something about it. So that makes it more salient. That makes her a much better messenger. And I think it'll matter a lot how she plays this week in particular with Bibi's visit, in terms of whether young voters who are like, I can't vote for, I hate Trump, but I can't vote for an administration and president who is committing a genocide, whether they are able to, stomach voting for Kamala Harris, given the complicity. But if she's able to strike some sort of a, arm's length distance from Bibi and express more empathy and just basic humanity towards Palestinians, I think that would go a long way. So we're going to talk, as I said before, to the Dearborn mayor today about how he is viewing things. It'll be interesting to hear from his perspective and that of his constituents, how they are assessing all of this. But, the other thing with Biden is yeah, the Democratic faithful were going to drag their butts to the polls and vote for him, but there was no enthusiasm for this man. I mean, he did not have ever a movement behind him, which is how also they were able to so easily push him out too, because he didn't have any sort of grassroots true base of support. Very different from a Donald Trump, very different from, back in the Bernie Sanders days. Even I would say different from Hillary Clinton, who genuinely had a group of women who were really in for Hillary, right?
Yeah.
He has never had that. He doesn't have that. He was a product of, the sort of elite machinations behind the scenes that brought him in. We are seeing a genuine surge of huge enthusiasm for Kamala Harris. We can put this back up. We can put this up on the screen. The amount of money that she is raising is astonishing. So this Politico article describes her big donor money bomb. They're talking about $150 million that was raised into a super PAC that will be all Kamala Harris all the time. In addition, we can put the next one up on the screen. They say that she raised $81 million in the first 24 hours since she announced. This is now up over $100 million. So $250 million in the course of basically a day. And not only that, but a huge number of these come from first-time donors. I have the numbers in front of me. More than 1.1 million unique donors. So individuals in the country given to the campaign, 62% of them first-time givers, and more than 58,000 people, I'm reading from Ed O'Keefe, by the way, on Twitter right now, have signed up to volunteer for the Harris campaign since Sunday afternoon. We were talking before the show, Ryan. I was really floored by, there was an organizing call among a group that organizes Black women. They had 40,000 people on this organizing call, and that's insane. Yeah. On a Democrat, for any group, for any time, et cetera, to have that many people showing up and saying, what can we do? How can we support? That is night and day from where they were with Joe Biden, where people were basically on a doom march to November.
Yeah. And then they had a call with Black men that had many thousands as well, that raised more than $1 million.
Wow.
That one raised several million. And I think your abortion rights point is so key, because people understand that they're actually, because just think about this. Will there be a material difference in abortion access in a Trump administration versus a Kamala Harris administration? And I think people just intuitively would say yes.
Yeah.
That there actually will be a difference.
Yeah.
The Trump administration will work to shut down clinics, to empower attorneys general who are trying to hunt women going across state lines. Will mess around with mifepristone, even if J.D. Vance says he's okay with it, which is the abortion pill that you can get by mail. There's also, they're like, are they going to try to constrict contraception?
Mm-hmm.
These are all
IVF.
Material things in IVF that you can imagine changing. And so often, business Republicans vote out of material reasons because they think they're going to get a tax cut. But in general, people vote on vibes and on emotion and on just kind of atmospherics of this is the party that I prefer over this party. Mm-hmm. But you're not exactly sure precisely how the policy is going to impact you directly. But when it comes to abortion rights, it stands to reason that there will be material difference between these two parties. And when it's on the ballot, on a constitutional amendment or referendum, people come out and overwhelmingly in every state support abortion rights.
Yeah.
So I think, combined with the honeymoon that she's getting, rather than Trump getting a honeymoon out of his convention, she gets the bump.
Yeah, the RNC honeymoon bump.
We'll see how much of it is a honeymoon and whether she can actually, because she's still an underdog. That's what people need to remember. They're completely over the moon for her.
She's just less of an underdog than Joe Biden
Less of an underdog, yes.
Which is incredible, because normally incumbency confers you with quite a political advantage. But obviously, because of his age and decline, that wasn't the case. I also think that may be changing, because people are just so dissatisfied with where the country is and where it's heading. It's almost more of a burden to be an incumbent and have to actually own the decisions and the state of the country as it exists under your presidency. But, TBD on whether that's really the case.
I think in some ways, Trump has all the advantages of incumbency without the disadvantages that you're talking about, because he's got the nostalgia as well.
Well,
people think of him as an incumbent, but they're like, yeah, things were okay then. Like,
Right.
But he's crazy and he's not in my face. But he's not in my face every day like he was then.
Yes.
So you kind of get the benefits without the costs.
I think that's right, because one of the major benefits of incumbency, a couple of them, one of them is the bully pulpit. Well, obviously Trump has a bully pulpit. Like, people are going to cover what he says. He can get cameras in front of his face whenever he wants to. He can drive the national conversation whenever he wants to, outside actually of this specific moment where nothing was going to drive the news away from the drama with Biden and Biden dropping out and who's going to be his successor, et cetera. But the other advantage of incumbency is just the fact people see you in the job. So it makes it easy for, they don't have to use their imaginations to think about what that would be like. And so they've seen him in the job. They know what that was like. And he's got the Trump bully pulpit. So I think you're right about that he has all the advantages of incumbency without being saddled with having to reckon with the decisions that are being made now, the state of the country now, and you can put rose-colored glasses over what his term was actually like, now that we're 4 years down the road. So I agree with you. I think Kamala Harris is still an underdog. I think she's got a much better shot than Joe Biden did. She has her own challenges and weaknesses, but what we're getting from the Republicans is some of the attacks that they've tried to launch on her have just been like,
oh God,
ridiculous, silly, embarrassing for them, bad, et cetera. But what they're likely to mostly do is paint her as, coastal, liberal, out of touch with ordinary Americans. There's also going to fixate on she laughs too much and her sort of goofiness and all of those sorts of things. And they'll certainly try to seize on otherizing her. Like J.D. Vance is already basically painting her as like a welfare queen. So they're going to do those sorts of things as well, which they may not be able to resist going too far in that direction in a way that is very negative and off-putting for them and reminds people of like some of the fringe views and extremism they don't like coming off that ticket. But the other thing is, going back to the abortion point, if that issue really does continue to be so central, the politics on that have moved so dramatically since Roe versus Wade was overturned. Now, for the first time ever, I think, certainly in our lives, you have a very clear supermajority in favor of abortion rights. Previously, this was a 50-50 issue. And so I talked ad nauseum way too much yesterday about Andy Beshear, governor of Kentucky, but Democrats in Kentucky forever were getting killed on abortion. They were running away from abortion as fast as they possibly could. You had tons of pro-life Democrats so that they could continue to get elected. Andy Beshear ran aggressively on choice in his gubernatorial reelect, and it was incredibly successful. That's how much the landscape has shifted on abortion. So painting Kamala Harris as a cultural elite in some ways only further solidifies people's view that like, oh, that means she's gonna be good on abortion rights. Like that means she's gonna be on my side and where I am on abortion rights. I think part of why that issue has been so salient and so politically powerful is not just because of the issue itself, it's because of the shock of having rights that existed and were taken for granted, taken away. And so in one instant, it blew up this very liberal notion of like, oh, progress is just inevitable and the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Then you have, oh, my mom had this right, my grandma had this right, and I don't? This is something I can't take for granted in the way that my mother did? What the hell is happening here and what else is on the table? So in any case, on that issue, I do think it's really clear that she'll be a more effective messenger, more compelling, more credible, that she'll actually do something about it. She's been open to getting rid of the filibuster in a way that Biden was never open to getting rid of the filibuster, so there's some substance there. Even as on a lot of the issues that you and I also really care a lot about, like on economics in particular, certainly on criminal justice, on foreign policy, Kamala Harris is just a giant question mark of what she actually believes and what she would actually do if she was president of the United States.
Yeah, and the cynicism that people have, justifiably, that the system can't produce much other change by voting, makes abortion rights such a more salient issue, because it's the one thing you actually can vote on.
That's a great point.
If people thought like, well, if I could vote on to give myself a raise or to, strengthen unions or anything else, they would happily do that, but they don't actually believe that the system's going to deliver that.
Right.
It's controlled by oligarchs.
Right.
But when it comes to abortion rights, like, oh, this actually policy is going to change based on voting patterns here.
Yeah. So at least what we're seeing in the early polling here, it's Trump still with an edge, but less of an edge, closer to a toss-up than it was with Joe Biden, but Kamala Harris still an underdog with some benefits over Biden and some definite drawbacks and coalition challenges as well. So we'll see where it goes from here.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.